My name is Elise Marin Cole. I am 32 years old, and I can tell you the exact moment I stopped expecting my family to show up for me. It started with a text that looked harmless, almost boring, the kind of thing you send without thinking twice because you still believe blood means something. I wrote, "My daughter's birthday party is Saturday. She'd love family there." That was it. No guilt trip, no emotional strings woven between the words, just a warm invitation from a tired single mom who still, somehow, thought maybe this time would be different. My mom replied first, "We're busy. Don't expect us." 7 words, as flat and cold as a slammed door. A minute later, my older sister, Carrie, chimed in. "She's too young to care anyway." I stared at that one for longer than I'd like to admit. I reread it 3 times, waiting for the follow-up joke that never came. Finally, I just typed, "All right." That's all I said. No angry paragraph, no sad face emoji, no begging. Just 2 words that felt like laying down a weapon. That afternoon, I watched my daughter run down the hallway with a blanket over her head, pretending to be a ghost, giggling so hard she almost tripped. I could already imagine the photos from her party, frosting on her cheeks, tangled hair from the bouncy castle, the kind of joy you can't fake. And I knew something else, something that settled in my chest like a small, sharp stone. The pictures we posted were going to hurt my mom and my sister more than any argument ever could. Not because I wanted to hurt them, but because they were about to see in full color what it looks like when someone finally stops waiting for you. You know those moments when you realize the people you thought cared actually don't? Not because they're overwhelmed or distracted or going through a rough patch, but because, at their core, they just don't want to care. That's where it all began for me. It wasn't a screaming match or a dramatic scene. It was a strange kind of quiet. The kind of silence that doesn't break anything out loud. It just slips in and lets you know they've checked out emotionally, maybe for good. I'd always tried to be the steady one. After my dad left when I was 7, some invisible contract settled on my shoulders that I never actually agreed to. I stepped up, not just for myself, but for everyone else. My mom leaned on me more than she ever had on my dad. Carrie never kept a stable job. She was always between things, always figuring it out. I stepped in where I could. I paid my mom's rent for a few months when everything crashed a couple of years back. I co-signed a loan for Carrie, something I regret every single day. I even covered her dog's emergency surgery last spring because she was ready to put him down if I didn't. I wasn't trying to be a martyr. I honestly thought that's what you do when you're the one who holds it all together. Somewhere along the way, I built a life of my own. I got a decent job, earned my way out of the constant panic of overdraft notices, and started rebuilding after my last relationship fell apart and left me with a daughter and a pile of broken trust. Eventually, I met someone good, my boyfriend, Nathan. He wasn't perfect, but he was steady. He showed up. He never tried to parent my daughter before she was ready, never tried to replace anyone. He just quietly fixed leaky faucets, remembered her favorite cartoon, and held me when the old memories got too loud. His ex-girlfriend, on the other hand, never really forgave the fact that he moved on with someone who came with a child and a complicated family. She hovered at the edges of our lives through mutual friends and social media, watching, occasionally stirring up small bits of drama that always seemed to circle back to the same theme. Who deserved Nathan's loyalty? I didn't know then how familiar that question would feel when it wasn't just about a boyfriend, but about my own blood. So when my daughter's 3rd birthday rolled around, I didn't think it was a big ask to want my family there. We weren't renting out some fancy venue or flying in a magician from across the country. It was a simple backyard party, cupcakes, a second-hand bouncy castle I found online, and a cartoon balloon arch that took me a full hour to assemble while I muttered to myself. We invited a few kids from her daycare, my friend from work who has a daughter the same age, and our next-door neighbors. Good people, the kind who bring soup when you're sick without asking for anything in return. I figured my family would want to come, not because it was mandatory, but because she is their blood, their granddaughter, their niece. I thought they'd want to hold her, to be part of the village I was trying so hard to build around her. Instead, I got, "We're busy. Don't expect us," and "She's too young to care anyway." And maybe that was the first honest thing they'd said in a long time. They'd skipped her first birthday because of bad weather. Her second because of Carrie's new job orientation. I told myself those were just unfortunate timing, that life gets in the way. But this time, there were no excuses, just the truth. They didn't care enough to come. That night, I watched my daughter twirl in the hallway, blankets spinning around her like a cape, and I made a promise. She was never going to feel the kind of silence I felt growing up. Not from me, not in my home. I decided I was going to throw her the best birthday she could dream of. Not to prove anything to my mom, or to Carrie, or to anyone else, but because she deserved it. Because this tiny human, who had brought more joy into my life than anyone ever had needed to know as early as possible, you are celebrated. You matter. So I got to work. I ordered a rainbow balloon arch kit and wrestled with it until my fingers were sore. I booked a small mobile petting zoo from a farm 2 towns over. Just a few bunnies, a goat, and a mini horse with a ridiculous name that made my daughter squeal when she heard it. I rented a popcorn machine. I found a college girl who spent weekends dressed up as a certain long-haired princess and booked her for an hour. Nathan helped me draw a rough map of the backyard on a scrap of paper, planning where everything would go, laughing as we argued over where the bouncy castle would get the best light for photos. Every night after my daughter fell asleep, I sat at the kitchen table, designing little party bags with handwritten notes for each kid. Not because anyone expected it, but because I wanted it to feel thoughtful. When the day finally came, it felt like the universe was conspiring with me. Blue sky, soft breeze, warm but not blistering. I was up at 6, running on caffeine and nerves, dragging tables across the yard and taping decorations that kept trying to fall. Friends arrived early. My coworker's husband brought his toolbox to fix the wobbly table I'd almost given up on. Our neighbors showed up with extra chairs and stayed to help set up a drink station. By 11, the yard didn't look perfect, but it looked alive. Bright colors, laughter echoing even before the official start time, the faint smell of popcorn in the air. When my daughter stepped outside and saw everything, she didn't say a word at first. She just stopped, eyes wide, tiny hands clutching the doorway. Then she looked at me, face glowing, and in that second, I knew I'd done it right. She didn't ask where Grandma was. She didn't ask about her aunt. She just squealed and ran straight to the mini horse like it was the most normal thing in the world to have one standing in your backyard. The rest of the day felt like a dream I wasn't ready to wake up from. Kids shrieking in the bouncy castle, music playing from the cheap speaker I'd balanced on a crate, adults talking and laughing, complimenting the setup. One dad asked me how much the party planner charged, and I laughed, telling him the planner hadn't slept properly in 3 days. When the princess arrived, the kids swarmed her. My daughter sat on her lap like she was meeting royalty, singing along, glitter dusted across her cheeks. Someone filmed the whole thing and sent me the video later with the caption, "She's going to remember this." I hoped she would. After everyone left and my daughter finally crashed for a nap, I sat on the grass in the fading light and scrolled through the photos on my phone. There she was, cheeks puffed, blowing out candles. There she was holding cotton candy bigger than her face. There we were together, her head thrown back in a laugh so big it looked like it could shake the sky. I hadn't planned on posting anything, but I did. 3 pictures and a simple caption. She won't remember everyone who didn't show up, but she'll always remember how happy she was. Thank you to the people who made her day feel magical. I hit post and turned my phone off, not because I didn't care if my mom and sister saw it, but because I already knew they would. The next morning, I turned my phone back on. No messages from them, no calls, just the usual likes and comments from friends. It wasn't until early afternoon that the first ripple reached me, a message from my cousin Jenna, the kind of relative who only appears when there's drama brewing. "Your mom said you didn't invite them. She's telling people you cut them out." I stared at the screen, hearing my mother's wounded voice in my head, rewriting the story without a single mention of the text I'd sent. Eventually, I replied with just one sentence. I invited them. They chose not to come. I thought that would be the end of it. It was not. The thing about lies is they travel faster than the truth, especially in families that thrive on whispers. By that evening, a few more names started popping up in my inbox. A great aunt, a second cousin I hadn't heard from since my graduation, all of them curious, concerned, and somehow already sure something terrible had happened between me and my mother. Jenna told me, "Your mom said you didn't invite them. She's telling people you cut them out." That rumor spread like spilled oil, coating everything. At first, I tried to keep it simple. Whenever someone wrote to me with some version of, "I heard you didn't include your mom," or "Why would you shut out your own family?" I copied and pasted the same line. I invited them. They chose not to come. I sent that sentence over and over, 5 times in a week. It became my shield, a tiny piece of truth in a storm of exaggerated heartbreak and selective memory. Nathan watched me type it one night from across the couch. "You don't owe them an essay," he said quietly. "They know what they did." I wanted to believe that, but I also knew my mother was a professional at rewriting history in real time. One relative messaged me to say she was so sorry the family's fighting, and that I should try to talk it out with my mom because she was crying earlier. Of course she was. There were always tears when the attention started to slip, always a trembling voice when someone questioned her version of events. It was never about what actually happened. It was always about how hurt she felt afterward, never about the decision, always about the reaction. I stared at that message for a long time before sending my one-line response again. On social media, the post of my daughter's party gathered likes and little heart emojis, but buried in the comments were subtle jabs and pointed silence. A couple of my mom's friends commented things like, "What a beautiful party. I'm sure Grandma would have loved to be there," which sounded sweet if you didn't know the truth. I noticed that Nathan's ex had liked one of those comments, the one that implied I was shutting people out. She didn't say anything outright, but that tiny gesture felt like a nudge, a reminder that there were always people willing to believe the worst version of me if it made their own stories easier to swallow. 2 days after the party, my mom finally texted. No hello, no mention of the invite I'd sent. Just, "I saw the pictures. Didn't expect you to turn it into a spectacle." That word lodged itself in my chest. A spectacle, as if throwing a proper birthday party for my own child was some desperate performance, a show for strangers. Not love, not effort, just an attention grab. I put the phone down on the counter and walked away. Nathan saw the tension in my shoulders and asked if I wanted to talk about it. I shook my head. "If I start, I won't stop," I said. So I didn't reply. I let the message sit there unanswered. Later that night, Carrie messaged me. "You really made me look like trash with that post. You know I had things going on. You could have moved the date." The entitlement in that one text made my hands tremble. Move my daughter's birthday for her convenience. Reschedule the one day my child gets each year that's fully hers, so my sister wouldn't feel uncomfortable. I typed and deleted 3 different responses before settling on nothing at all. I locked my phone and slipped it under a couch cushion like I could bury the whole thing with it. The old version of me would have called my mom, apologized for making her feel bad, and tried to find some compromise. I would have reassured Carrie that I understood she was busy, that I didn't mean to make her look like trash, even though she'd done that all on her own. I would have offered to stop posting family stuff online to avoid misunderstandings. I would have shrunk myself to fit into their comfort, but I wasn't that version anymore. I had a little girl watching me now, learning from the way I handled being dismissed, and then blamed for reacting. That week, the tuition bill for a community class Carrie was taking landed in my inbox like it always did. I'd been paying it quietly for months, no fanfare, no gratitude, just automatic transfers and the assumption that I would keep catching her when she tripped. I sat there staring at the email, my cursor hovering over the open button. Then I clicked the tiny trash can icon instead. Deleted. No warning, no explanation. The monthly transfer I'd been sending to my mom for emergencies was next. I opened the banking app, scrolled to the recurring payment, and canceled it with a single tap. It wasn't about the money. It had never really been about the money. It was the principle that gutted me. I had carried them quietly for years. I'd helped hold up the life they liked to present to the world, a daughter in classes, a household that always somehow scraped by, while they gave me scraps of effort in return. The moment I asked for something simple, something that didn't even cost them a dime, just their presence, they shrugged and told me not to expect them. So I stopped paying for people who made it clear I didn't matter. The silence that followed was different than before. Before, it had been dismissive, casual, like a hand waving me away. Now it was heavy, watchful. My mother didn't text to ask why the transfer hadn't gone through. Carrie didn't ask where the tuition payment was. No one confronted me directly, but I could feel the shift, like the air just before a storm breaks. For the first time, they weren't ignoring me because they assumed I'd eventually fall back in line. They were regrouping, calculating. Nathan noticed the difference, too. One night, as we cleaned up dinner, he said, "You know they're not going to just let this go, right?" I rinsed a plate and set it in the rack. "I know," I said. "They don't know how to exist without control." He dried his hands and wrapped his arms around my waist from behind, resting his chin on my shoulder. "Whatever they try next, you don't have to face it the way you used to. You're not alone anymore." I believed him. But a small, familiar knot of dread still twisted in my gut, because I also knew my mother and my sister. They never stayed quiet when they thought they were losing their grip on a story. A week after I canceled everything, my phone rang from an unfamiliar number while I was folding tiny socks and pajamas on the bed. I almost let it go to voicemail, but something made me swipe to answer. "Hello?" I said, tucking the phone between my shoulder and ear. There was a pause, then a man's voice, hesitant and slightly awkward. It wasn't my mother. It wasn't Carrie. It was Carrie's boyfriend. He sounded like he'd rehearsed what he was about to say, like someone who'd been nominated to step into a mess he didn't create. As soon as he introduced himself, my stomach dropped. My family had finally made their next move, and I had a feeling whatever was coming wasn't going to be an apology. His voice was tight, the way someone sounds when they've been pushed into making a call they don't want to make. "Hey, Elise. I'm not sure if Carrie mentioned anything." Already, I felt a headache blooming. He continued before I could respond. "There's been some confusion. She feels really bad about how things went down. She's been trying to reach you." She hadn't. Not once. He kept talking, stumbling through the script Carrie had clearly fed him. "We wanted to do something, to make things right." That phrase alone made my jaw clench. In my family, making things right never meant taking accountability. It meant rewriting the story so their version sounded noble. Then he said it. "We're organizing a surprise party for your daughter. Something small. Just close family. It's this weekend. We already booked a room at a restaurant with a play area. Balloons, cake, one of those banners with her name on it." I stood perfectly still, a freshly folded pair of pajamas in my hands. A second birthday party, a do-over. Not because they wanted to celebrate her, because they needed to fix how they looked. He wasn't finished. We already told your mom. She'll be there, and a couple of relatives. You and your daughter just have to show up." Just show up, like I was the missing piece in their PR stunt. A carefully staged photo op to plaster across Facebook. "Look, we love her, see? We celebrated her. Everything's fine." A fake narrative reconstructed and ready to be deployed. "I hope you two can come around," he added softly. It'd mean a lot. I didn't feel anger. Not exactly. It was more like a wave of clarity, a clean, cold understanding of exactly what this was. They weren't inviting us. They were setting a trap. I didn't say no. I didn't say yes. I just said, "I'll think about it." He seemed relieved. Okay, great. Just let us know." When the call ended, I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the wall. Nathan walked in holding a laundry basket and saw my face. "What happened?" he asked. I told him every word. He didn't raise his voice. Nathan didn't do anger that way. He just breathed out slowly and said, "They're trying to clean up the mess they made without admitting they made it." "Yes," I whispered. "They want proof they're good people," he said. "Not to you, to everyone watching." I nodded. "They want a picture with her, one picture, and suddenly they're the doting family again." "And you're supposed to pretend the first party never happened," he added. He sat beside me. "Elise, don't let them weaponize her birthday." That sentence hung in the air, heavy, true, necessary. I didn't tell him the part that hurt the most. Somewhere deep inside, a younger version of me still wished my mom and sister would show up with sincerity. Not performance, not manipulation, just real presence. But that version of me was growing smaller every day. Instead of telling Nathan all that, I just said, "I'm not going." He smiled gently, like he knew I'd get there. Good. But I didn't stop there. The next morning, I planned something entirely different for the day of their fake party. Something real. Something for my daughter, not for anyone's image. On Saturday, I woke her early. She rubbed her eyes and blinked at me sleepily as I whispered, "We're going on an adventure." Her whole face lit up. "Where?" "You'll see." I packed snacks, her favorite blanket, a pair of binoculars she'd gotten from a kid's science kit. Then I drove 2 hours to a wildlife sanctuary she'd been begging to visit for months. Giraffes, otters, monkeys, a petting zone with animals that made her giggle uncontrollably when they nuzzled her hands. Just me and her, walking trails hand in hand, stopping to point out butterflies and birds perched high in the trees. Real joy, real memory. Across town at the same moment, my mother, my sister, and a cluster of confused relatives were sitting in a rented party room surrounded by deflated-looking balloons and untouched cake, waiting, whispering, blaming, trying to explain why the birthday girl wasn't there. At 4:17 p.m., my phone buzzed. First Carrie. Unbelievable, after everything we planned. Then 5 minutes later, you humiliated Mom. She was crying. We were trying to fix this. I was watching my daughter feed a giraffe through the fence when those messages arrived. I didn't reply. That night, after I tucked her into bed, I posted one single photo. Her sitting on my shoulders, pointing at something out of frame, sunlight catching her hair, juice box in her hand. The caption was one word: unforgettable. Nathan saw me post it and placed a quiet hand on my back. He didn't need to say anything. We both knew the message wasn't for the internet. It was for my mother, for Carrie, for anyone who had twisted the truth into something sharp enough to hurt me. 2 days later, my aunt, one of the few relatives who never picked sides, called me. She'd gone to the surprise party. She told me it was one of the most painfully awkward things she'd ever attended. People kept asking where we were. No one had real answers. Carrie mumbled something about miscommunication. My mother claimed I refused to forgive her. Someone whispered that I'd changed since I got money. That part caught me off guard. Yes, I'd been earning more lately. Yes, my life was more stable. But the stability was something I'd fought for tooth by tooth. I didn't flaunt anything. I didn't owe them for it. I was just finally steady on my own 2 feet. And steadiness, I realized, is threatening to people who prefer you broken. What I didn't know then was that the real unraveling, the part that would change everything forever, was already beginning behind the scenes. And it would start with a breakup I had nothing to do with. It happened 3 days after the failed surprise party. A text from Carrie lit up my screen while I was slicing strawberries for my daughter's snack. I almost ignored it. My piece had been too expensive to let her buy her way back into my attention. But the preview line caught my eye. I really need your help. I opened it, already bracing myself. She wrote, I know things have been tense, but I need a deposit for a new apartment just this once. Brandon and I split. He walked out. Split. Walked out. I blinked at the screen. Strawberries bleeding red juice on the cutting board. The same boyfriend who called me, that sweet, painfully awkward man, had finally reached his breaking point. I didn't get the full details, but I didn't need them. The message said everything. Something about how I treat people, she wrote. He said he's tired of defending me. My hands stilled. A strange hollow ache settled in my chest. Not pity, not satisfaction. Something in between. The quiet realization that the consequences she'd spent years outrunning had finally caught up. Once I would have rushed in. I would have opened my banking app without hesitation. But now I simply closed the message and slipped my phone into my back pocket. I didn't reply. I didn't even reread it. Because for the first time in my entire life, I didn't feel guilty for protecting myself. That silence, the one coming from me, shifted everything. The next few days were strange. I wasn't hearing from Carrie, but I was hearing from almost everyone else. Old relatives, distant cousins, people who hadn't spoken to me since high school. They all had opinions, questions, concerns, probing little messages disguised as compassion. You only get one mom, Elise. Your mother is heartbroken. Family is everything. Pride ruins relationships. Their words came at me like darts, all aimed at the same vulnerable spot they'd relied on for years. My reflex to keep the peace, even when the peace was killing me. Nathan noticed the tension in my shoulders, the way I rolled my neck as I stood at the sink, the way my jaw clicked from clenching. One evening, after our daughter was asleep, he put a gentle hand on my arm. You don't have to read those messages, he said quietly. I nodded, but part of me kept expecting the next blow, the next tactic. It arrived on a Tuesday afternoon. The doorbell rang while I was working from home. I checked the camera and froze. My uncle, my dad's brother, a man who lived out of state, a man I hadn't seen in almost 4 years, a man who stayed so far out of family drama he practically lived in another dimension. I opened the door, startled. He looked tired, road-worn, and serious. "Can we talk?" he asked. We sat at the kitchen table, the same table where I'd filled party bags, planned decorations, laughed with Nathan. My uncle didn't waste a second. "I was at the party," he said. I stiffened. He continued. "It was a disaster. People showed up thinking it was a reconciliation, but instead it was chaos. Passive-aggressive comments, whispering, finger-pointing." My stomach tightened, but he wasn't done. "Your mom kept saying she was heartbroken, kept telling people you shut her out. Carrie said you were turning your daughter against her." I swallowed hard, jaw clenching. Then he leaned back, paused, and looked me in the eye. "But that's not why I drove here." He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out something small. He slid it across the table. I stared down at an old, worn photograph. A man holding a baby. My father. Me. I hadn't seen that picture in my life. My uncle cleared his throat. "There's something else, something important." He hesitated, choosing his words. "Your mom tried to say you never invited her to the first party. She was telling everyone it was last minute, that you shut her out." My heartbeat quickened. My hands curled into fists. He continued softly, "But I saw the text on her phone, the one you sent about the party. She didn't realize it was still open while she was scrolling. You did invite her. She just didn't want to come." The truth landed like a stone. There it was. Proof. The one thing I never thought I'd get. For a moment I couldn't speak. He seemed to understand. "I figured you deserved to know," he said. "And Elise, you don't owe them anything anymore." My breath hitched. Not once, not ever, had anyone said that to me. Everyone else, for years, had said, "But she's your mom. Family sticks together. You should forgive. Blood is blood." But never, "You don't owe them." Then he tapped the corner of the old photo. "He gave this to me before he left," my uncle said. "Told me to hold on to it. Said one day, when you figured out who you are, you'd understand why he couldn't stay." A heavy stillness settled between us. My father left when I was 7. No note, no explanation, just vanished. I spent years assuming he'd abandoned us, that he was too weak to love me, too selfish to stay. But now, I looked at the tired man in the photo, at the sadness in his eyes, and for the first time I wondered if he hadn't run away from me, but from them. My uncle didn't stay long. He squeezed my hand before leaving. "If you ever need real support, no strings, no guilt, call me." After he left, I sat at the table for a long time, staring at the photo, at the truth, at the man who walked away, and the man who might have understood me better than anyone. The next morning, my phone buzzed. A message from Carrie. "Mom's in the hospital, chest pain, you should call her." No details, no apology, no acknowledgement of anything. Just another attempt to pull me back in. And here's the part almost no one understands. I didn't panic. I didn't cry. I didn't even feel anger. I felt nothing. Just a strange, calm stillness, like stepping out of a storm I hadn't realized I'd been standing in for years. I didn't reply. I didn't call. I took my daughter to the park instead. And for the first time, the world felt quiet in a way that wasn't scary. The old version of me would have run back, but that version was gone. And my mother wasn't prepared for the woman who took her place. By the next afternoon, the storm had shifted, not toward me, but around me. A cousin I barely knew messaged to say she'd visited my mom at the hospital. "It's not life-threatening," she wrote. "Blood pressure, stress, they're just monitoring." She was emotional, though. Said she couldn't understand why you won't talk to her. I didn't respond. Not because I didn't care whether my mother lived or died, but because I finally understood something crucial. Every crisis in my family had always been a trapdoor. The moment you stepped onto it, you fell back into the same patterns. Guilt, obligation, twisted roles you never agreed to. I wasn't stepping onto that trapdoor again. 2 days later, my phone lit up with a screenshot someone sent me. A social media post. Carrie had uploaded a photo of her and my mother in the hospital room. My mother was sitting upright in bed, sipping tea, looking tired but very composed. Carrie's arm was wrapped around her in a perfectly staged display of daughterly devotion. The caption read, "Family sticks together, no matter how broken things get." No mention of me, no mention of why things got broken. Just a narrative crafted to make them the wounded heroes of a story I supposedly destroyed. Nathan saw me staring at the image and walked over quietly. "Don't let that pull you back in," he murmured. "It's bait." He was right, but the strangest thing happened. I didn't feel the usual sting. No guilt, no panic, just clarity. A few more days passed before my mother texted me directly. The message was long, longer than anything she'd written me in years. She talked about the hospital stay, about how stress had taken a toll on her, about how she'd been thinking a lot about our relationship. She said she missed me. She said she wanted things to go back to how they were. But she never said she was sorry, never mentioned the birthday invitation, never acknowledged the lies she told, never addressed the way she'd tried to manipulate the story, the relatives, the emotions. Instead, she ended with one line: "I just want my family back." And that was the moment everything crystallized inside me. She didn't want me back. She wanted the version of me who paid the bills without complaint, the version who absorbed the insults and the dismissals, the version who kept the peace even when they were the ones lighting the match, the version who didn't ask for anything in return, not presents, not honesty, not basic respect. She wanted the daughter who made her life easier, not the woman who finally chose herself. I didn't respond right away. I let it settle. I let myself breathe. I reread the message the next morning, and then I typed a single line, one that came from a place not of anger, but of undeniable truth. "You had your family. You decided I didn't matter." And then I blocked her number. I blocked Carrie's too, and the cousins who kept fishing for details, and anyone else who treated my boundaries like invitations to argue. Nathan didn't say anything at first when I told him. He just pulled me gently into his chest and kissed the top of my head. "I'm proud of you," he whispered. "Not for walking away, for not abandoning yourself." Life became quiet after that. Not lonely, just quiet. My daughter adjusted faster than I expected. Children sense peace even when they can't articulate it. She stopped asking why Grandma didn't visit. She stopped asking why Aunt Carrie didn't come to birthdays. Instead, she started talking about school, about the turtles she loved, about the rock a boy named Nolan gave her. Her world was blooming, full of color, untouched by the emotional wreckage I'd spent a lifetime navigating. Months passed. The silence from my mother and sister didn't feel ominous anymore. It felt clean. The absence of chaos is its own kind of gift. Then, one afternoon in the spring, I found a letter in my mailbox. No return address. Inside was a small note. "He passed in January, kept the photo of you by his bed. M." It took me a moment to understand. My father. The man who vanished. The man everyone said didn't care. The man I'd spent years resenting. I held the note for a long time, not crying, just breathing. For the first time, I realized maybe he hadn't abandoned me. Maybe he'd escaped the same cycle I had just broken. Maybe he couldn't stay because staying would have destroyed him. That night, I watched my daughter sleep. Glitter from a school craft clung to her cheek. Her turtle book lay open beside her small hand. The room glowed with soft, warm light. Love lived here now. Stability lived here. The kind of peace you build deliberately, piece by piece, when you choose not to repeat the mistakes that raised you. I didn't miss my mother, or my sister, or the version of family I'd been forced to carry. I missed the idea of what they were supposed to be, and that's different. Now, our circle is small. Friends who become family, neighbors who show up, people who help carry tables and sweep up confetti without being asked, people who mean it when they say they care. On my daughter's next birthday, she didn't ask about anyone who didn't come the year before. She only asked one question. "Will the giraffes be back?" And they were. Because she doesn't remember who wasn't there. She remembers the joy that was. A year has passed since the silence began. The drama faded. The lies fizzled out. The guilt traps went quiet. Peace settled in like sunlight breaking through clouds. And I realized something as I tucked her in one night. Family isn't who shares your blood. Family is who shows up, stays, tries, even when it's hard. That's all I ever wanted. And now, finally, that's what we have.